Imagine waking up on your 30th birthday, and instead of cake and candles, you open your banking app to a number that makes your stomach drop. $0, 0 cents, 10 years of paychecks, gone. No savings, no investments, no safety net, just nothing. This is Ron, and today we are talking about the harsh, uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit out loud. What actually happens to your life if you spend your entire 20s spending instead of saving? Not the vague warnings your parents gave you. The real, specific, brutal timeline of what your 30s, 40s, and beyond will actually look like if your savings account reads exactly $0 right now. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear this message, and it takes you 2 seconds. Alright, let's get into it. Let's start with the number itself. $0 saved. It does not sound dramatic when you say it quickly, but sit with it for a second. Zero means that if you lost your job tomorrow, you would have no cushion. Zero means if your car broke down, you would need to put it on a credit card. Zero means that any emergency, any surprise, any single bad month could push you into debt that takes years to climb out of. That is the starting point of this story, and it is the starting point for millions of people right now in their late 20s and early 30s. Here is the part that really stings. It is not really about the money you didn't save. It is about the money that money would have made for you. This is where compound interest enters the conversation. And honestly, compound interest does not care about your excuses. Let's do the math, because the math is where this story gets painful. If you had saved just $200 a month starting at age 22, and invested it in a simple low-cost index fund averaging around 7% annual returns, by the time you hit 65, that account would be worth over $500,000. $500,000 from $200 a month. Now here's the twist. If you wait until age 32 to start that exact same habit, that same $200 a month, you would end up with less than half of that. Same monthly amount, same rate of return, just 10 years later, and you lose more than half the outcome. That is not a coincidence. That is the mathematical cost of waiting, and it is the single most expensive mistake in personal finance. So if your 20s pass by with $0 saved, understand this clearly. You didn't just lose the money you spent. You lost the decades of growth that money would have quietly built for you while you slept, while you worked, while you lived your life. That lost growth doesn't come back. There is no version of your 40s where you get to rewind and unlock those 10 years again. Now let's talk about what your life actually looks like at 30, 35, and beyond, if this pattern continues unchecked. At 30 years old, with nothing saved, you are entering what should be your prime earning years already behind. Your friends who started saving early are watching their retirement accounts and investment portfolios grow almost automatically. Meanwhile, you are still living paycheck to paycheck, and worse, the lifestyle inflation trap has usually already tightened its grip. You are making more money than you did at 22, sure, but somehow you have even less left over because your rent went up, your car payment went up, your subscriptions multiplied, and your spending simply expanded to match your income. This is called lifestyle creep, and it is silent and it is devastating because it convinces you that you are doing fine, right up until the moment an emergency exposes exactly how fragile your finances actually are. At 35, the psychological weight starts to shift. This is often when people first feel real anxiety about retirement, because the math starts becoming impossible to ignore. If you have $0 saved at 35, you now need to save far more aggressively than someone who started at 22, just to end up in a similar position by retirement age. Financial experts often say that by age 35, you should have roughly 1 to 2 times your annual salary saved. $0 is not close to that benchmark, and the gap creates a very real, very heavy sense of falling behind, one that can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your confidence. Let's talk about the social and emotional side of this, because personal finance is never just about numbers. It's about identity. It's about how you feel every time a friend mentions buying a house, or a coworker casually talks about their 401k match, or a sibling shows off their retirement account balance at a family dinner. When you have $0 saved, these moments sting in a very specific way. Not because you are a bad person, and not because you are lazy, but because society ties self-worth to financial stability, fairly or not, and having nothing saved can quietly chip away at your confidence, your sense of control, and even your willingness to make future plans. There is also the compounding effect of stress. Financial stress is one of the leading causes of anxiety, sleep issues, and relationship strain in adults. Studies consistently show that money is among the top reasons couples argue, and financial insecurity is directly linked to higher rates of depression and chronic stress. So the zero in your bank account is not just a number. Over years, it becomes a background hum of anxiety that colors decisions you make in completely unrelated areas of your life. Should you take that trip? Should you start that relationship? Should you switch careers? When there's no cushion beneath you, every decision feels riskier than it should. Now let's talk about debt, because zero savings rarely exists in isolation. It usually travels together with debt. Credit card balances that get carried month to month. Buy now, pay later plans stacked on top of each other. Maybe student loans that never got paid down because there was never anything extra to put toward them. This is the trap. When you have no savings, every unexpected expense becomes new debt, and that debt comes with interest, and that interest becomes yet another monthly payment eating into an already stretched paycheck. It becomes a cycle. No savings leads to new debt. New debt leads to higher payments. Higher payments lead to even less ability to save, and around it goes, year after year, unless something breaks the pattern. Let's fast forward further, to your 40s and 50s, because this is where the consequences of a wasted 20s become impossible to ignore. Retirement, which once felt like a distant, abstract idea, suddenly becomes urgent math. If you're 45 with minimal savings, you may need to save an enormous percentage of your income, sometimes upwards of 30 or 40%, just to retire on a modest timeline. For most people at that income level, that kind of saving rate is simply not realistic without major lifestyle changes, which means the retirement age quietly shifts. 65 becomes 70. 70 becomes never. Many people in this position find themselves working well into their 70s, not by choice, but because the math simply does not allow for anything else. And here's a truth that doesn't get said enough. Time is the one resource in personal finance that money literally cannot buy back. You can always earn more money. You can get a raise, start a side hustle, change careers, work overtime, but you cannot manufacture more time for your investments to grow. A dollar invested at 22 has more than double the growth runway of a dollar invested at 35. This is why financial advisors repeat, almost obsessively, that the earlier you start, the less effort it actually takes. Someone who starts at 22 might only need to save 10 or 15% of their income to retire comfortably. Someone who starts at 40 might need to save 30% or more just to end up in a similar place. Waiting doesn't just delay your progress, it multiplies the difficulty. Now, I want to be very clear about something because this video is not meant to just pile on guilt. If you're watching this and your savings account currently says $0, this is not a moral failing. This is not proof that you are bad with money, or careless, or destined to struggle forever. Life is genuinely expensive. Wages have not kept pace with the cost of housing, healthcare, and education in the way previous generations experienced. Many people carrying zero savings are not doing so because they bought too many lattes. They are doing so because rent alone eats 40, 50, sometimes 60% of their income, and there is simply nothing left at the end of the month. That is a real structural problem, and it deserves to be said honestly, not brushed aside with generic advice. That said, here is the part that matters most. $0 saved today does not have to define the next 50 years of your life. The story you just heard, the one about falling behind at 30, feeling the weight at 35, and working into your 70s, that story only continues if nothing changes. And the good news, the genuinely good news, is that even small changes made today create dramatically different outcomes tomorrow because of that same compound interest that punished delay. It rewards action just as powerfully as it punishes procrastination. Here is what breaking that cycle actually looks like in practical terms. It starts with building even a tiny emergency fund first, not thousands of dollars, just $500 to $1,000 set aside, so that the next unexpected expense does not become new debt. That single step alone breaks the cycle we talked about earlier, the one where no savings leads to debt, which leads to less ability to save. From there, it becomes about automation, which is genuinely the most powerful tool available to anyone trying to fix a $0 starting point. Automating even a small percentage of your paycheck directly into a savings or investment account removes willpower from the equation entirely. You stop relying on remembering to save or feeling motivated to save, and instead you make saving something that simply happens, automatically, every single payday, whether you think about it or not. This is exactly why automation is at the center of this channel, because financial success rarely comes from discipline alone. It comes from systems that work even when your discipline doesn't. Next comes addressing high-interest debt strategically, focusing extra payments on the highest interest balances first, while continuing minimum payments on everything else. This is often called the avalanche method, and mathematically, it saves the most money over time. And finally, increasing your savings rate gradually as your income grows, instead of letting lifestyle creep absorb every raise. Even committing to save half of every future raise while enjoying the other half can completely transform your trajectory over just 5 or 10 years. The truth is, your 20s being difficult financially does not mean your 30s, 40s, and 50s have to follow the same pattern. The people who turn their finances around are rarely the ones who make one massive dramatic change. They are the ones who build small, boring, automated systems and then simply let time do what time does best, which is compound. So here is the real takeaway from all of this. $0 saved is not a life sentence. It is a starting line. The version of your life we described, the stress, the falling behind, the working into your 70s, that only happens if this moment changes nothing. But if you take even one small step today, an automated transfer, a tiny emergency fund, one extra debt payment, you begin rewriting that entire story. This is Ron, and if this video gave you the wake-up call you needed, make sure you're subscribed, because we break down exactly how to automate your way out of situations just like this one, every single week. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where your savings stand right now, and I will see you in the next video.